Hierete friends, welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Mark Grace, and today we're going to be talking about what a goddamn pain it was just to frickin' wash your dishes in the ancient world. My major source for this video is Running the Roman Home. It's a book by A.T. Kroom. It's a wonderful book. It goes through all the details of running a Roman home, but on a daily basis, all the little nitty gritties. How do you wash your dishes, clean your clothes, what type of trees are best for making brooms out of, all of those cool little details. So absolutely, please check that out if you're interested in learning further. And also, I am very, very sorry if there's any lawn care noise coming through to you guys. There's never not someone mowing their lawn in my neighborhood. So I'm just gonna have to go for it and hope that the mic can filter most of that out. So I'm sorry. Thank you so much for your patience. Let's get started. Especially when it comes to Rome and water, we tend to think, oh, well, they had those amazing aqueducts and those fountains, and they had the public toilets and the public baths, and they had water everywhere, right? It was super easy. Not so fast, especially if you didn't live inside of the city. Plenty of people lived out on farms and in small towns, and in the vast majority of those cases, you do not have access to an aqueduct, so you have to find water elsewhere. So some of your options are to go to wild water, so lakes and ponds and rivers around you, but you have no knowledge or control over what goes into those rivers, and also they're probably not right next to your house. There's probably a bit of a distance between you and that water. Another option is to collect rainwater, but then you have to be able to store it and keep it fresh for pretty long periods of time, because obviously it doesn't rain every day, and especially the keeping fresh part is hard because water that just sits and is still doesn't keep very well, especially if you don't have like plastic and stuff. And then when it comes to wells, your property may or not be able to have a well on it. It just doesn't work everywhere. You have to have a certain level of skill to figure out where is the best place to put it, and then it takes a lot of effort to build one of those suckers. And in all of those cases, or most of those cases, that water is not going to be running, and it is not going to be inside of your house. So you every day are going to have to physically carry in buckets water from outside inside, and this is a huge job. In this book, it estimates that you're going to need at least 7 to 18 liters per person per day. And obviously most houses are not just going to have one person. Everybody had big families, lots of slaves, and so it's going to take you literally hours every day just to carry water. And so if you have any slaves at all, you are absolutely going to be giving them the job of carrying water for everyone. And in fact, big wealthy households would have hundreds of slaves, all of them with pretty specialized jobs. You might have somebody whose job is just to iron all the clothing, but you'd have at least a couple of slaves whose job is to carry water around all day, every day. So let me elaborate on those a little bit, starting with the lakes and the rivers and stuff. So like I said, they're questionable when it comes to whether or not they're hygienic. People use rivers to dump sewage, to dump bodies, to dump who knows what else, and you have no control over what's happening upstream of you. You're also at the mercy of the weather and the seasons, because plenty of water sources will go down or completely disappear if you've got a really dry spell, and then you're kind of screwed. And the government could also come in and screw you, because if the Romans want to build an aqueduct that uses your lake to feed some city off somewhere else, then that's too bad for you. Then when it comes to rainwater, lots of Roman houses do have impluvium, so to sort of catch and store rainwater, but it's questionable whether or not you're going to be getting enough to supply your whole family for all of their needs. The Mediterranean has a very dry climate, so it's questionable if you're going to get enough rain. And like I said, long-term storage is very tricky. You're going to get leakage. You're going to get stuff growing in there. You can't keep it very fresh very well. And then the other problem is that if you are trying to store that much water, I mean, 18 liters per person per day, then that is going to take up a lot of space. That's going to be a big tank. And so upper class people can manage that, middle class people somewhat sometimes, but if you're like a poor Roman worker living in essentially an apartment building, then that is completely out of the question. Wells were a pretty good way to go, but like I said, you might want to hire a professional to help you locate where you're going to put it, and then it's a lot of work and resources to dig it out and then to build the thing. And we found quite a variety of different styles of well. Some are all the way low to the ground, some are higher, some are covered, and then you have to decide what sort of pulley system you're going to use. And lots of people just go for the rope and the bucket, ye old faithful, but we have some more complicated rope and pulley systems that we found as well. And I'm going to pull a passage from that book that I mentioned that kind of talks about some of the details of building a well. An aquilix was hired to choose the best place to site the well, and then a large inverted cone was dug until they hit water. A shaft was built in the center of the cone, which was then backfilled with soil. So let's say that you do live in the city, you probably still do not have piped running water in your house. That's something that the wealthy could afford, probably some of the middle class, but for most people you have to trek to those fountains. So you can imagine a Roman who's living on the 5th floor of an apartment building that's, say, 3 blocks away from the nearest fountain. Every day has to make that trek, get that water, and hike all the way back up. And they have to carry everything that they're going to use. And also, somewhat understandably, because this is a public city resource, there are more regulations about how and when you can use that water. So lots of cities would limit the hours that you could access these public fountains or wells. A lot of times they would time these windows so that it was before and after businesses would open. So it would just be kind of a couple of hours. The reason being that they don't want everybody all lining up to get water and then blocking all of these businesses or all of these carts that are hauling goods in and out. So you've got a very limited window to get your water. And then lots of cities would also prohibit things like washing your laundry at the fountain. So you can't just haul your laundry down to the fountain, wash it there. You have to haul all the water to your apartment, wash your laundry in your apartment, and probably get water everywhere. And then you're also not allowed to dry your laundry out in the street. You have to keep it in your house, so you've just got these sopping wet clothes hanging all over your tiny little shoebox apartment. Finally, some houses did have piped running water, all of that goodness, but like I said, it's expensive, and also they usually didn't use taps. For whatever reason, most water was just perpetually flowing, and so that led to a lot of water actually being used for flex purposes, for ornamentation, and the flowing water was not actually used very much for practical things. So people would have piped water for things like fountains, right, to decorate their home, to show off to guests that they could afford this. But when the cook actually needed water for her stew, or she needed the floors mopped, she would have to still send some slaves out to fill up some buckets for those practical jobs. Then, once you finished hauling all of that water in, that may not be the end of your job, especially if you're getting water from a lake or a river or something. You now have to clean your own water. So the first step in that is settling. Obviously, aqueducts generally would do this before they would send it off to fountains, but if you're just hauling buckets in, you've got to do it yourself. So you would just set these buckets for a while and let all of the sand and sediment and leaves and whatever else is in there just sort of settle to the bottom. And then you would pour all of that into a tank so you could keep using those buckets to haul water. And lots of Roman homes had this piece of furniture, basically just a giant water tank. It's called an urnarium. And so we're going to look at a passage from Wero that describes this very common piece of Roman furniture that you've probably never heard of. A table for vessels, rectangular, it was called an urnarium because it was the piece of furniture in the kitchen on which, by preference, they set and kept the water jars, or urnae, filled with water. From this, even now, the place in front of the bath where the urn table is wont to be placed is called the urnarium. Finally, you probably want to boil that water, and so almost all houses, not only in ancient Rome, but just generally throughout the ancient world, would have a giant bronze kettle pot thing that was permanently in the kitchen and was specifically for boiling water. So you'd probably never wash it. It would just sit there and you would just boil water in it every day. And it was so important that it was actually like legally, technically considered part of the estate. So just like now, if you sell a house, it's expected that you leave the toilet in the house and that you don't take the toilet with you, right? It's expected that that is part of the property. Same thing with these boiling vessels. They were considered to just come and be attached to and be essential to a Roman house. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope it gave you a greater gratitude of all the modern conveniences you have in your life. Special thank you as always to subscribers and to Patreon members, and I hope to see all of you again next week. Hαίrete.